Kaelen Jones. Alongside me is my man Myles Duve, and you're here. Thanks again for, your thing is the NBA draft. I'm butchering this, as well as the first game of the Western Conference Finals yesterday. That ended up being a little prize for you. Why don't you give us a little explanation on that?
I can't get over it. It's like I woke up this morning and to see that it was still real and I wasn't dreaming that the Lakers got the number 2 overall pick. I was ecstatic. But all around, I mean, the draft order pretty much stuck to form. 1 through 14, obviously throughout the lottery. Other than just the Knicks falling to number 4, which propelled the Lakers and the Sixers up a couple spots. So I think that for those Knicks fans, though, that are, I guess, complaining or think it's pretty much the end of the world at this point in terms of lottery, they're still number 4 in the draft. They can still get a really talented prospect, whether it's Emmanuel Mudiay, who I currently have them pegged at in my mock. Whether it's an Emmanuel Mudiay, I could see them going with a Willie Cauley-Stein there, or even a Justice Winslow from Duke. I mean, there's a lot of options there for them at number 4 that I think they can get a franchise caliber player. So that's going to be interesting to watch what the Knicks actually do, because I think that is the point in the draft where things get really interesting. But yeah, touching back on the Lakers, it's exciting because I think a big man for the franchise fills a positional need, whether it's Karl Towns or Jahlil Okafor, I'm just assuming, positional need. But these players, both Towns and probably more so Okafor, are seen as NBA-ready talents who can step in and be franchise bigs for you immediately. And for the Lakers, who have a history of franchise as being a franchise that is built around that big man, whether it's Kareem, whether it's Shaquille, or any of the other big men, Mike, there's always that one guy in the center that has been a part of the Lakers' glory days. And so I think that brings a lot more credibility to a franchise that kind of lost that in the last couple of years with their failures. And hopefully it's Karl Towns. In my personal opinion, he's the best player in the draft. But if it's Okafor, I don't think they can really go wrong with either one of the picks. Consider them taking over LA again. I think it's time for the Lakers to step up and take that next step in the next couple of years. I hope so.
Clippers still, as far as I'm concerned, the Clippers still own LA. They're the only team in the playoffs. But I mean, you talked about, especially with the Timberwolves having the number 1 pick, whether they decide to go for, whether they decide to go with Karl-Anthony Towns, makes it easier for the Lakers should they decide to go with a big man. Really simple choice, but I mean, we'll see. This is your thing. I'm really excited to get into this because draft season is finally here for you. I know you're excited.
Well, let's the draft order in itself, because we have, like I said, pretty much most of it stayed to form. But I think it's going to get really interesting. As I was saying, I kind of touched on it before. I think 1 through 3 are pretty much set. I think that the 2 big men go 1 and 2, and then I think D'Angelo Russell will likely go number 3 to the Philadelphia 76ers. That can always change, but that's pretty much what I think is set at this point. But then 4 through 14 is going to be interesting anyways. Emmanuel Mudiay is probably most likely to be taken there now, but he's the mystery man of the draft. The Knicks kind of are trying to win as soon as possible. I think that's what Phil Jackson wants to do. And while I personally would take Mudiay there, I would not be surprised if they went with the Willie Cauley-Stein, or if they went with Justice Winslow, a defensive anchor on at small forward wing positions, who I think could develop into the next Jimmy Butler or next maybe Kawhi Leonard type of player. He can be a great 2-way player in this league down the line. So you can make a case for 3, even 4 guys at that spot if you want to add the foreign players and Kristaps Porzingis. I can't pronounce his name, but the guy from Latvia, 7'1" power forward, more of a stretch player, but you can make a case for him because many people consider that he is a top 2 or top 3 prospect in the draft. So that's where it gets interesting. And if the Knicks were to, Cauley-Stein is traditionally pegged to be around number 6 for the Sacramento Kings. Now, if they were to go number 5 or number 4 with Cauley-Stein, then I think Mudiay would fall to number 6 at the Sacramento Kings position. And that would be a great nab for them because if anyone's going to fall to that top 4, I think Emmanuel Mudiay is the guy just because of the question marks surrounding him. And he did suffer ankle injury in China, didn't get a lot of playing time. So there's a lot of question marks in terms of how much he's played and how seasoned he really is. Emmanuel Mudiay to the Sacramento Kings would be a really interesting fit for me, and honestly, that would be a steal in my opinion. But if there's anything you want to touch on about your Heat or anything, you can take.
If he were to fall to number 10, go to the Heat. Like you said, I find that to be an interesting dynamic. I feel like, again, any guy who I'm not gonna like just out of bias, but like you said, Myles, he's stronger on the defensive end right now. And a few years down the line, he's going to be good on the offensive end. So you couple that, you play him behind Luau Deng. He even had some injury concerns throughout the year this year. I think that's actually a great fit, at least for his future. But touching on the other two, I mean, I'm not really too surprised. I think it's interesting that they're considering to put D'Angelo Russell and pair him up with Michael Carter-Williams. And, I've seen that mocked a few times where the 76ers are selecting D'Angelo Russell, who's also a stretch point guard, and then playing Michael Carter-Williams in comparison to how Michael Carter-Williams, his success in Philadelphia, success of D'Angelo Russell, and projecting that with the guys like Nerlens Noel. I forget the.
I like the fit a lot, honestly. I like D'Angelo Russell, and I think that as much as people like to bag on the Sixers, I understand what they're doing here. Michael Carter-Williams, as good as he did play for them, winning Rookie of the Year, there were so many fundamental flaws in his game that were not exposed because he was the best player on the court for Philadelphia, but are being exposed now while he's in Milwaukee. So I think they made the smart move in terms of getting a potential lottery pick from the Lakers in that trade. So if they go with D'Angelo Russell, he has the ability to play point guard and the shooting guard. He's a 6'5" point guard, shooting guard. But the difference between him and Michael Carter-Williams is pretty drastic in terms of their offensive ability, but also in terms of their defense. Carter-Williams is a much better defensive player. He's a lot more lengthy, a lot more long, but he's not nearly the offensive weapon that D'Angelo Russell is. I mean, his game is so smooth, so crafty. It's a lot like a James Harden type of player. Plays low to the floor. He's not extremely athletic. He can dunk the ball, of course, but he plays really low to the floor, and he's a very, very phenomenal. No problem. He's a phenomenal passer, and I think you put him in that pick and roll game with Nerlens Noel, who showed a lot of potential towards the end of the season, and then Joel Embiid, who's coming back. He has a pretty good range for his size. He can step out and shoot that mid-range jumper with pretty solid efficiency. So you can run that pick and roll, pick and pop game with D'Angelo Russell and either Noel or Embiid. I think you have a really bright future in Philadelphia, to be honest. I see what they are doing here, and I think a pick here with Russell is where they're going to start their true building a contender. I don't think they're going to do any of those trades. They have Dario Saric, who they drafted last year at around number 9. They have him overseas. He may come over next year. I'm not sure how that buyout situation will work, but he can play the small forward and power forward and is more of a slasher type of player. And I think he fits perfectly in Russell, Noel, Embiid type of lineup. They have a team that's currently constructed, I think, to do well years to come. I'm not as much as a Hinkie hater as most people are.
Yeah, and I was about to ask you that. Like, do you feel like them tanking was a bad idea? Because it looks like it could end up panning out. Should Russell be a stud, and then on top of that, you're adding Saric to the lineup? What are your opinions on that?
Right, and they finished as the third worst team, and they ended up with the 3rd overall pick. So you can't really complain about that if you're them or if you're the fans. So I think that tanking in itself, it was pretty obvious that's what they were doing, but you can't argue against it. They didn't have a team to build a contender. They didn't have the assets to build a contender. So first, then in the middle of the pack, right? I mean, Boston did this year, finishing, I believe, at the very bottom or near bottom of the Eastern Conference, and then they end up, losing out on a lottery pick that could have been valuable for their team. You don't want to be in that situation if you're Philadelphia. So I get their motives there. Yeah, it is a little unappealing to watch a team that's so terrible. But then again, like I said, they're on their way to some sort of credibility, some sort of consistent structure of a team. If they can nab this draft pick with D'Angelo Russell, we'll never know. We won't know if they end up trying to trade it or do something insane. And that's when I start to change my tune on this. But if they go with the best player overall there, who I think would be Russell, then yeah, they're building for a strong future. I certainly think so. So tanking itself probably was worth it. It's interesting because they could have ended up with the Lakers because everybody wanted them to end up with those 3 in the top 11, but that way, but they do have those picks coming for them in the future. So, oh yeah, exactly. That affects both. We ended up with picks, man, and I couldn't be happier. I know you're.
What's remaining for us? I mean, watch everyone in the draft, Myles. I keep seeing Justice Winslow being mocked to Orlando, so that would pair for Victor Oladipo, Tobias Harris, should he stay, and Justice Winslow top contenders.
Honest, I was a person who thought that Winslow, like I think middle of the season, I was like Winslow to Orlando is as good of a fit as you can possibly get in the draft. And it seems like it could potentially pan out that way. But personally, at this point, I don't really like that fit anymore. And I personally have Porzingis mocked there, the stretch big from Latvia, because it's possible to have too much of a good thing, I think. And when you're Orlando, they have Elfrid Payton, they have Victor Oladipo, they drafted Aaron Gordon last year, and all 3 of those players do one thing well and one thing not so well, and that's they defend very well, but they don't shoot very well. You bring Justice Winslow in there, he's really of that same exact mold. And not only that, but he's a dominant ball handler already for a small forward. They already have 2 pretty dominant ball handlers in Elfrid Payton and in Victor Oladipo. And then you throw in Aaron Gordon, who he showcased some type of ability to handle the rock too. So I think that's too much clashing styles there. I think what they need there is a stretch big, which they tried to implement with Channing Frye last year, but he didn't really pan out as well as they wanted to. So if they can get a stretch big like the Kristaps Porzingis, and he can really develop, I think, into one of the steals of the draft there at number 5, because this guy, honestly, there's very little flaws about his game other than the fact that he's a really lanky, not necessarily a very strong build, doesn't have a strong frame, so he's not going to post you up, and he's not much of an impact defender. But what he will do is stretch the floor out for guys like Oladipo and Elfrid Payton to drive to the basket, which they excel at. So because he can shoot the 3, he's 7'1", he has the size, and he's a much better version of Channing Frye at this point, I think, and that really is what they need for that offense. Honestly, I think they need some 3-point shooting there, and Justice Winslow, as great as he is, as much as I like him as a prospect, I just don't think that's the best fit for him or the team.
4 guys who can dominate the ball. Because I remember Aaron Gordon dominating the ball against Mater Dei in high school. I remember that.
Yeah, and that's no as much as at Arizona, but that's really what he wants to do is dominate the ball, and it clashes way too much with Winslow, I think, especially since they both kind of are hybrid small forwards, power forward type of. So, not a good fit there. It's not a good fit.
All right, draft finally. We actually spoke right before the first game of the Western Conference NBA or Western Conference Finals kicked off last night between the Warriors and the Houston Rockets. What were your takeaways from the game? Warriors ended up pulling that one out after getting down early against Houston, who ended up almost losing to a major injury. What were your thoughts?
I don't think that the series is as decisive as people want to say. I think I mentioned it yesterday. I may or may have not. I don't think Houston is completely out of it like people suggest. I don't think it's going to be a definite 6-game win series for the Warriors. Look, Houston was able to stay close with the Warriors throughout that game. They went up on an early lead. They lost it. I think they fell behind by 5, maybe even double digits at one point. But then they came back with a steal from Trevor Ariza late in the game, and then a 3 from Ariza as well in that same play. And they weren't able to get the 3 from Josh Smith, but they still showed a lot of heart out there, even with Dwight Howard injured. And I think that when you look at really the comparisons between Houston and between the Golden State Warriors, what's going to come down to is in the trenches, or I guess I don't know if in the trenches is the right term, but in the middle, in the paint. It's going to come down to Josh Smith, Dwight Howard versus Draymond Green and Andrew Bogut. You better hope Dwight Howard is healthy, because without him, they're not winning the series. But if he can come back, play at an all-star caliber level defensively, and if Josh Smith can continue his level of play, I think that if they can win that matchup there between Draymond out of his mind yesterday, Sean went off for a career high and playoff. They're not going to get that every night. Steph Curry's not going to play out of his mind every night. He's going to be great probably most nights, but still, that's a little step back from being out of his mind, right? And that's
it sure is
just great last night. The Rockets probably would have won that game. And what I've always said actually is just let the series get to Game 5. Always decides the series. Game 5. I mean, if it's a close one between these two teams who are 1 and 2 in the standings, both finished in the top 5 in offensive and defensive efficiency. Both are phenomenal three-point shooting teams, and both pretty much dominated the regular season. So I'm saying it's going to be a close series. We know that. Let it get to Game 5 out of Houston, back to State, and then we'll really know what's coming out here. Because in career high game, in the same game that Dwight Howard was hurt, I'm just not going to overreact to it. So I honestly would not be surprised if the Rockets pulled out a win here, but I'm still picking the Warriors, like I said yesterday, just because I picked against them all year.
Yeah, I feel like if Dwight Howard plays in that game, it's a totally different outcome because looking at the Warriors started to dominate the game, to me was inside. Steph was out of his mind. He's playing out of his mind. Yeah. But at the same time, the way that Houston, at least on both sides of the ball, to me, they were less efficient and less dominant once Dwight Howard went out. Because Howard was playing extremely well up to the point that he got hurt. He had a great impact on the game on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively, as easily as he was. Bogut was being soft, at least for the first 15 minutes, in my opinion. So it would have been a totally different game. But that's going to be what determines the winner of the series is really who wins, 1, the rebound battle, and 2, the turnover battle. Like, once Howard went out, Harden, I think, had like 6 turnovers during the third quarter or the second quarter. They had 6 turnovers in one quarter. And you can't have that against a team like Golden State who can run offensively and really snap into a groove the way that they did, because they ended up running out Houston out of the game completely.
Yeah, and you made a key point about Draymond Green being out of the game with Dwight Howard, and Dwight Howard was working the defensive boards like a monster before he got hurt. So that's really the key to me, that he comes back and is healthy. And I think they could steal a game 2 in Golden State. I think easily the series can turn into a 2-2 series. And then, like I said, Game 5 decides it. Houston has shown resilience throughout the entire postseason and throughout the regular season in general. I mean, they've dealt with injuries to Dwight Howard throughout most of the regular season. Donatas Motiejunas is out for the rest of the year. Patrick Beverley has been out for consistently throughout his last 2-3 years and is now out for the rest of the season. And Terrence Jones even suffered injuries throughout the season. So they've dealt with this throughout the year. They're really battle tested, and I think that's an advantage that they have over the Warriors, is that players like Trevor Ariza, players like Dwight Howard, and even James Harden in the time in OKC, even Josh Smith when he went, Dwight Howard went to the finals with Orlando, and they're really battle tested. I think that the Warriors don't necessarily have that in any of their players, at least not that comes to mind right now. I don't think there's any player in this. Yeah, there's no player I don't think one player on the Warriors that's made it to the finals or even this far. Perhaps Andrew Bogut or David Lee, but I can't think of anybody. So I think that can be something that can push them over the top at the end of the day if the series becomes really close. They are extremely battle tested as a team.
Yeah, that's something that they're able to overcome towards a deeper run in the playoffs. But lastly, Myles, I know that you being a Lakers fan, of course, news today, we don't know whether to take. At least I don't know whether to take it too seriously or not. Tom potentially on his way to LA. They'd be paying 4 head coaches at the same time, which is what I find extremely comical. But what are your thoughts on the potential of the former Bulls head coach being in LA?
Well, he's still the current Bulls head coach. Let's not put him out there. He's pretty much 1 foot out the door. So it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up. I think you could see him going to New Orleans, coaching a great player in Anthony Davis. You could see him going to potentially Orlando, coaching some really young defensive studs there with Oladipo and Payton. But the thought of him going to Los Angeles is quite intriguing to me as a fan. And honestly, it's not that bad of a fit when you look at what the Lakers have coming in the next couple of years. They have this number 2 overall draft pick this year, guaranteed to nab one of the top 3 players, whether they go Russell or one of the bigs. And they have a good amount of cap space to sign a max player in this offseason, which could maybe, if they structure a contract, beat Thibodeau's old team, Jimmy Butler from Chicago. We'll see. But they have the ability to sign someone to a max player or 2 pretty solid contracts. And then they have cap space in 2016 after this year when Kobe's contract officially is off the books and the cap raise is going to go up. And talented young players in Jordan Clarkson and Julius Randle who are already established on the roster. So down the line, if you're a coach and you want to coach in that big city of Los Angeles and you don't mind the bright lights, or you actually embrace the bright lights and you think there's a lot of potential with the team and you trust the management, then it's a good fit, especially if you're a player like Thibodeau, who likes to develop young players from the start, make them into defensive studs as he has in Chicago, like he did with Jimmy Butler, did with Joakim Noah, did to an extent with Todd Gibson and Derrick Rose as well. And I think he could get the most out of these Lakers players on that end. His offense is still in question, but and there's no question that he's a better coach than Byron Scott is, better the other 3 coaches they have on their payroll right now. So it would be interesting to see that dynamic if he were to actually end up in the Lakers jersey. But I'm not counting on it as
at least with the Lakers. But thanks. Thanks. I mean, that's going to do it for us here at The Scoop. I'm Kaelen Jones alongside my man, Myles Duve. Make sure you check us out on YouTube. Check out the podcast. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at The Scoop Sports. Thanks again for tuning in.